All right. Welcome to Living the Fit Life podcast, episode 64. I'm your host, Chad Mueller, and I'm so excited for all you tuning in. This marks our season 3 premiere of the Living the Fit Life podcast. It's sort of crazy to think that it's been 3 seasons and started in 2020. We took a little bit of a break for the past few months, but we're back and we are planning a really, really big season of awesome guests. And today I'm super excited. We have a big guest today, super excited about and jacked up about this man that we're going to talk to, the legend, the Thundrbro. He reigns thunder, Dave freaking Lipson. How's it going, Dave?
What's up, Chad? Oh, man, I'm so stoked to be here. You guys out in Canada, you're so lucky to have this guy he's your national treasure right here, especially in the fitness community. So when I spoke to Chad, I was like, hey, you don't know this, but I'm like Chad Miller, #1 fan right here. What's going on?
Kind words.
It's great to be on with you. I always love talking with you.
Yes, same here, man. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm sort of like, I woke up this morning, I'm super excited. I got a workout in at 5, got back home at around 7. I was just like, I need a good workout in, get a sweat out. And I'm like, I haven't podcasted it's been a few months since like November. So, and I was like, man, the best person to talk to is you, Dave. Like, I'm like, this guy's the best. So I'm going to sit down and have a great chat and looking forward to it. So we're going to dive into fitness, recovery, nutrition, all sort of things.
Like Cam and I, we do our podcast and
it's awesome.
I think the hardest thing is actually doing it, like consistently. Because I'm like, whenever we record it, it's awesome. There's great subject matter. People like the conversation and everything like that. I'm like, it's just a matter of us being able to like carve out the time to actually get them in because we got a lot of balls in the air, so to speak. So I totally feel you gotta get your reps in. And it sounds like 64 episodes deep. You got a nice little start here, Chad. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've done pretty good. And yeah, your podcast is great. I really like enjoying it. But honestly, like the feeling I get with podcasting is like, it's great having a conversation. And then after, just like, you just feel like, just so like, I just have such a like, I don't know, an endorphin rush, or it's almost like a workout after. It just feels great that I had a chance to have a good conversation with somebody. And it's like, I can't wait for people to hear about it. So,
at least once a day, Cammie and I or someone else will be talking about something. We'll get deep into a heated discussion and pull out a couple, gems out of our ass. We're like, fuck, we should have podcasted this. It was the record button was on. That was beautiful.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to get some of those gems today. So yeah. So I guess first I just like to maybe, I know you probably talk about this a lot, but a quick intro for the guests. Maybe more specifically, how did fitness start for you? Like, what was your first thing that you got into fitness or athletics?
Oh, man. I mean,
was it baseball? Sport?
I'm probably very similar to most people. I got into sports and athletics kind of for a weird reason. And most people may not know this, but the story is when I was 5 years old, my mother and I were in a very horrific car accident. We were in like this little Isuzu, and mom fell asleep at the wheel. I was asleep in the passenger seat, and we went head on with a minivan.
Oh my God.
And so I was in the hospital for a long time. Mom was in the hospital for a long time. I started kindergarten a little bit late that year. This happened over the summer, right before my first year of kindergarten. And then as time went by, the teachers were like, David's not talking. He's not speaking. Like, does he have autism? Like they thought something is wrong. So they're like, all right, they pulled me out of school, yada, yada. There was a lot of post-traumatic stress there for a little kid. I had no idea what was going on. I was just, but I was a very kind of scared, shy, quiet type of kid. And I found that like the one place that I actually felt powerful and in control and that I had some kind of worth and value, or that I could be a big version of myself, was, at like recess or in gym class. And so sports to me became a really sacred place, right? Where it was like, this is my time to feel like I can be myself, to feel great about myself, to be that version of myself that I'm too scared to be outside the sporting field. And so that kind of continued on. And as you matriculate through sports, I played all kinds of sports. I was a pretty good runner. So I did sprinting, did football, basketball. But as I kind of get closer to high school, it was becoming clear that I was like a really good baseball player. And as, Major League Scouts started coming by and college recruiters started coming by, they're like, oh, I should focus on this. So I would do track in the off season. I would do baseball pretty much year round. And then after high school, I went and played in college and then professional baseball. But for me, like that story kind of continues because sports were a place for me to find myself. And after a while of being, the captain of the baseball team, I slowly started bringing that outside the field, in the regular day life. It gave me a little courage or confidence to ask a girl out on a date or, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That when my baseball career ended, obviously, I had such a deep emotional attachment to sports and athletics. That's pretty terrifying to think I compare it to that Derek Zoolander moment when he walks outside, there's a new guy in town and he looks into a fiddle and he's like, who am I? And I'm like, well, if I'm not a baseball player, then who am I? I mean, since I was probably 14 years old, I was always introduced to everyone as David, the baseball player.
Right.
It was a pretty, I think a lot of athletes go through this where they're trying to just understand what is my value outside of the baseball field. And, what I've come to realize over time is that sports, they're just a vessel for us to express our gifts, and there's lots of different ways to express it. And I always love the process of preparing for baseball, of training, of preparation, of applying stress to your body to create a response. And, later on in my baseball career, when I had a big reconstructive elbow surgery, that was really when I started getting into training because I had such a death grip on my career that I was like, no, I'm not letting this go. Whatever happens, I need to have this. I decided that if my elbow was going to be my weak link, that I was going to make the rest of my body as strong and as formidable as possible. And I made a promise to myself to be the biggest, strongest guy in the organization. And, in an organization full of monsters, I'm going to be the strongest dude, on this team. And so I really started getting into strength training and coming back after a season of being completely out rehabbing and training, I went from about 185 pounds to 225 pounds over the course of an entire year. And that was just learning some basic stuff, with baseball training's pretty archaic. They don't like pitchers to lift. And so it was the first time I was actually doing back squats and deadlifts. And I honestly started, training. I was just a naturally strong person, got this, my grandpa was super strong. I just had the ability to really just get the most out of my body mass or whatever. So, even when I started training, I had close to a 500-pound back squat, first time I really started squatting. Yeah, so it wasn't that hard for me to get a response. When I came back the following year, I got a lot of pushback from coaches and people in the organization saying, you're too big, you're too bulky, you're going to be muscle bound. And what ended up happening was I came back and I was actually a lot better. I was throwing harder. I was more injury resistant, more resilient. Right. And to me, I was like, oh, this is it. This, working on your biology, your contractile potential, your physical body is the foundation of any athletic endeavor because it's the muscle that puts action on the bones. So whether you're a baseball player, a CrossFitter, a power lifter, endurance athlete, it starts with muscle, right? And then, I started to get a hankering for not just training myself, but sharing what I was doing with other people because obviously,
of course, yeah.
Wanted to do what I was doing. And just now, people I want to look like you, or what are you doing? You're the hardest thrower on the team. What's your throwing program? So I'd take some of my buddies to the gym and I'd be like, okay, here's what I do. And it was super basic stuff, really simple, but I love that idea of just kind of sharing with them. And it's not, it's not just training, right? It's training hard that gets you the results. So because I had that deep seated emotional attachment to my sport, I wouldn't just train. I would train my life depended on it. And that really never ended, right? Every time I go to
it doesn't seem like it.
There's always that set or that exercise or that complex where I'm able to go there and exercise the demons, so to speak. And to me, that's what I love so much about training is that taking yourself to that place where you can call on that level of adrenaline and that kind of visceral survival response. And it just to me, it makes me feel like a man, And then so after baseball, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I tried a bunch of different stuff. And I said, let me try training. Maybe, I don't know. Like I'm already kind of training my, some of my teammates, and I wasn't sure if I was going to go back and play another season of baseball. So I took a job in Manhattan at a very private, exclusive gym training people, and, just got my feet wet in the industry. My entire last year of professional baseball, I spent just like studying. I had this huge textbook called The Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, which is kind of the gold standard text for being a certified strength and conditioning coach. And I kind of had an idea. I'm like, maybe I'll be an organizational strength coach, or maybe I'll go and train athletes, or I'll go work at a private facility. I was kind of thinking more like doing things with elite athletes. I was like,
right.
I think I want to train baseball players or football players or whatever. But once I started training people, what I realized is that, like, one, the market for those people is really small. And two, for me as a trainer, it was a lot more rewarding for me to take somebody who was not already really fit and make them like 1% fitter, but to take somebody who was kind of like, going from zero to hero. Like that to me is the most exciting thing, taking these people who that's a life-changing thing. You drop 30 pounds off of somebody, you put on 20 pounds of muscle mass, they're doing things they couldn't do before, their confidence, it affects every part of their life. It becomes an integral part of who they are as their daily process of habits and the fabric of, what they're about. That stuff extends beyond the gym. And then, after training people, I kind of found CrossFit a little bit, and I liked the idea of competing a little bit myself. And that kind of led me down a whole different road, competing in CrossFit and working for CrossFit HQ for a decade, and just kind of getting deep into that CrossFit community, so much so that it was like an unhealthy level of submersion into CrossFit.
Well, I want to ask, about your time in sport, because I find a lot of people that we talk to, and I think a lot of people that I know, they have some sort of athletic background, right? In some sort of high level sport, college sport, whatever. And like you said, it's a very sacred thing to them. It's like they lived it for a long time, and it was their brand. It was their thing. And my thought is that CrossFit has been successful because it's been sort of like a second career for some competitive people, because it offered fitness in a competitive way. And I often think about, like, is that why CrossFit has sort of become what it is today? Because it's, you finish your sport because of age and life, whatever, you have to get a job. You're not good enough to be a professional sport. And then it's like, well, I need to scratch that itch. I need something. And that's where I feel like something like CrossFit, and I'm sure there's others, sort of broke into the scene. And I think that's one of the reasons why I see a lot of people that are sort of from previous athlete to now CrossFit, quote unquote, athlete or CrossFit person. Did you find that kind of scratch that itch for you?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think just being in this industry for as long as I have, now I'm in my 40s. I've been doing this for like, a good 15, almost 20 years. People want to feel special, right? Everyone's got a hole to fill. And I think that CrossFit can make people feel special for a number of different ways. One, they feel part of a community, right? People say, oh, it's kind of a cult. Well, it can be, depending on, what you're into and who you're listening to and this and that. But at the affiliate level, right? You're going in and you're part of a group. And this is not just like, this was so markedly different to like the CrossFit or the group exercise model versus the club gym model. Right. And some group exercise models do it better than others. CrossFit does it exceptionally well. When you're part of a community that is shared suffering and you're being vulnerable with people and they're seeing you, right? You're no longer putting on a front. And that is kind of the standard. We'll say, oh, check your ego at the door. But just like simple things like in a CrossFit gym, people talk to you. Like you go to a regular gym, you start just like talking to random people, you're going to get a lot of pushback and a lot of just looks and like, why are you talking to me? Like, what do you want from me? You trying to sell me something about me? You asking me on a date? Like in CrossFit, it's like, it's more of a fraternity, right? And every time especially when you start, when you work out, that's your pledge. You're pledging right now, right? And as you go through that, as you get indoctrinated into the community via shared suffering and learning how to move and how to work hard and the whole lifestyle, you become a part of it. And it goes from a workout program to part of your identity, which can be a nice thing, but it can also be a bad thing too. Okay?
Yeah.
Because, that's when tribal thinking comes into play. And, kind of that's when it kind of can become a little bit of a cult. So I like to kind of work on the fringe. It's like enjoy the community aspect, but you don't have to go full tilt into it, right? But I think that's probably the thing CrossFit has done the most well. From a training perspective, they brought some really good things into mainstream training, primarily just the use and application of functional compound movements that have high utility and application outside the gym, right? And that's the biggest thing. We can debate about the formula of the program. There's obviously things that, everyone has opinions about, like, the formula, it's off, the constantly varied functional movements at a high intensity. If there's any piece of that formula that's right, it's the functional movement. And that's what you see has the most spillover into the industry as a whole, because now whenever you go to Crunch Fitness or 24-hour Fitness or whatever the chain gym is up in Canada, you're going to see an Olympic lifting platform and some gymnastic rings and a kettlebell and a pull-up bar. And you're seeing more and more people doing, compound functional movements that are actually able to produce results from, a physical and neurological, application. So, before you'd go into one of those club gyms, it's all machines. And I think a lot of CrossFitters kind of started in that model where, like, I used to go to 24-hour Fitness, it didn't work. And then I did CrossFit and all of a sudden it's the best program ever. And the reason for that is because, for the first time, you're actually practicing and learning how to move. And for the first time, you're actually working kind of hard, right? Because when you walk in the gym, like, nobody wants to look silly in a regular gym. Like, no, everyone is like worried about how they look. So if you're grunting or suffering or whatever, there's like, the lunk alarm is going to go off or whatever. So yeah, I think those are some of the reasons why. And I guess you could say, like, for me, from my perspective, and probably my wife shares the same opinion, those are the most valuable things that CrossFit kind of brings into the fitness industry and to people, is that community and that idea of just practicing functional movements.
Yeah, no, very well said. I didn't want to spend too much time on the CrossFit thing, but, like, if anybody searches your name, they'll find lots of material online, whether you're part of the sort of the coaching staff or even you competing. How would you summarize your time in CrossFit, whether it's from a competing perspective or coaching? Like, how do you look back on that time period for yourself?
Well, like, my journey in CrossFit's like probably the same as a lot of other people. Like, probably nearly identical. I probably stuck around a little longer than most. But when I found it, I was so excited by it because it was like opening up a new door. I remember kind of saying to myself, like, damn it, like, I was a professional baseball player at a world-class high level. I spent so much time trying to, make my body perform the best I possibly could. I was getting paid to play. And I feel like a lot of the training I did was only scratching the surface because, I could never do an overhead squat. I never even tried an overhead squat before. And the first time I did it, I couldn't even get into a position. And, you see so much, I call it the honeymoon period in CrossFit, where when you start practicing this stuff, there's this huge, improvement, like a vast big curve going up, exponential every day you're coming in, you're getting a new PR, you're learning a new movement, you're getting into a better position. Like, that improvement curve is vast and quick. And primarily that's just like a lot of it is just like neurological, of just understanding how to use your body. And to me, that was so exciting, right? It was also exciting to feel like I had, I could be an athlete again, or I had something to compete for, where when I would go into a regular gym, I didn't feel that bloodthirst in there. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't feel that eye of the tiger thing going on. It was just like, you need to have whatever it is you're doing. You need to have a very strong why, right? Like, why are you doing this? And I think that the CrossFit, gave people like a new why. Like, why? Because I want to see what I'm capable of, I want to see how fast how can I be, and it doesn't matter what level that has. And then, from there, competing kind of becomes this self-feeding monster where, like, you kind of live to compete, and you're online, and you're like looking at scores and watching videos, and just, it's like taking over. And working for CrossFit was just like to me, the idea of spreading that passion, right? Spreading that passion and that knowledge for like, this stuff is special. Here's why it's special, yada, yada. After a decade of repeating the same lectures and experiencing some things that made, my eyebrows rise a little bit, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, because I didn't believe everything I was saying. And, we had this staff of people, it's like regurgitating Greg Glassman's words. And as I started to kind of like get to know and even learn about him more, I'm like, I don't know about this guy. Like when I originally met him, I was like, oh, he's a genius. He's a visionary. Right. And then as time went on, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. There could be a lot of things going on there, So anyways, I started coming up with my own ideas. And I think that one of the things that you can probably categorize for most people, and this is really where the road splits, is, you have two types of people. You have people that are in a growth mindset, right? These are people that are seekers, that are willing to question their beliefs, that want to know more, that want to, they typically are able to just like, put their ego and separate their identity from, what they know and what they think. And then you have people that attach those ideas to their identity that are unwilling to challenge them. And I think that for me was the point where I started to split, because I could see, like, I was like, I think maybe we can rethink this. I think there are ways to maybe improve upon this program. I think there are things we need to consider. But, a lot of people get defensive. And although CrossFit says like we're a feedback driven community, any type of, constructive feedback gets squashed.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. So as an example, in 2000 and I think it was 16, Camille and I were at the Trainers Summit for CrossFit. It's where they bring all the HQ staff in. We were like in Dallas or something. And the directors of training, Dave Castro and Nicole Carroll, who we knew well and we still, are friendly with, they asked like, hey, Dave and Cam, would you guys like to create your own course? And I think what they were thinking was they're always trying to like expand their specialty courses, and they wanted Cammy, maybe she wanted to do something with like competitors. I think their competitors course was kind of like not doing so well. And they were thinking maybe Cam can come up with her own course with Dave and those two will just travel around. Well, anyways, I said, yeah, I got a great idea, because this was right around the time when, I was getting injured a lot, and Cam too. Like she had a dislocated, completely torn shoulder. I had a major reconstructive back surgery. And that was where I really started exploring like hypertrophy. Like what are different ways for me to create intensity to get increased size and strength without just going as fast as I can or as heavy as I can, right? What do those different ways kind of look like? And I started reading, actually, I probably got it right here. This is my Bible. This is The Science of Muscle Hypertrophy, and by Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. And actually, as soon as I started reading that, I contacted him and had some great conversations with him. And what I was saying is like, I want to understand the context here. Like, how can I take this, the methods, the mechanisms, the practice of hypertrophy and combine it with the pursuit of elite athleticism and functional fitness, and what could that look like? And so I started using myself as a guinea pig. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like, one, I'm training pain-free now, because it doesn't always have to be as heavy as possible. There's lots of different ways to challenge muscles. And two, I'm like, I'm looking a little different. Like I'm starting to put on size. And not only that, I'm starting to learn a lot about all of the other layers that surround that stratosphere of hypertrophy that are like nutrition, lifestyle, internal chemistry, all these things that can help maximize your ability to create anabolic environment in your body, and a lot of things that were actually contrary to what we're teaching in CrossFit. So, my proposition to them was like, let's do a hypertrophy for functional fitness course, or let's do a CrossFit hypertrophy course. Well, they basically like laughed at me. They were like, like bicep curls? No way. No, we're not doing that. Like, forget it. And I go, no, I don't think you understand. Like, there's a whole science here. There's a bunch of stuff starting with just understanding the cellular anatomy of muscles and the adaptation process that takes place and the types of training that garner hypertrophy and how you can combine that, like all this stuff. I said, let me just like, I'll write a little article for you in the CrossFit Journal about it, because I don't think you understand what I'm talking about, right? I'm not talking about bodybuilders that do CrossFit. I'm talking about a whole new opportunity for people to find success when they become like me and Camille, when they start to plateau and they start to get injured, this is the way. And really the reason why that's the way is because it's the same thing we teach in the level 1. You have neurological and biological adaptations, right? The neurological ones, the software, how well you communicate with your body, and the biological ones, the cross-sectional size and strength of muscles as their contractile potential. So when you get to the point where you already have the positions and you already understand the patterns, your opportunity for improvement from a technical standpoint is fractional. Really, the most opportunity is increasing your physical body. The biological adaptations are increasing the cross-sectional size and strength of muscles to express more power. So, that's a handle. But I'm like, let me write it in. All right, I write it in an article. I'm diving in. I'm writing this science. I'm like, this science is fucking kick-ass. I got all this stuff highlighted from the book. I'm like, this is fucking gnarly. And I'm going and I'm writing. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not an article. Maybe it's 2 articles. So I go to the second one now. I'm like 20 pages deep. And I'm like, oh, but I didn't talk about nutrition. So let's get into that. And now supplements. And what about the sleep? And now internal chemistry. And it's 100 pages long now.
Right. Okay.
And so I'm about to submit it to the CrossFit Journal. And I called up the guy there who was managing it. His name was Mike. And I said, Mike, I have this article. I wanted to submit it to you guys. But before I do, because I just had a weird feeling that they were just going to try to squash this. Okay. If I give it to you, would you own it? And he said, yeah, as soon as you submit it to us, we own it. And I go, okay, forget it. I'll publish it myself. And so that was my first book, Hypertrophy for Functional Fitness, which is an argument for how and why to implement hypertrophy training into functional fitness to address these things that are happening on a daily basis, which is the reason why there's attrition from CrossFit, why we're losing members is because of the injury, because of the plateau, because people are not getting the results they want, right? And this is the answer. And now here's my 100-page argument to back it up. And that was our first product at Thundrbro. After putting that out, we got a lot of feedback saying okay, that's cool. I love the book, but how about a training program? What would this look like? Can you give me a sample training program? So I wrote the same program that I designed for myself with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld after my back surgery called the 90-Day Get Huge program. Because after back surgery, here's the question, how do I get bigger and stronger without loading myself up with massive amounts of weights? I said, hey, Brad, they're not going to let me lift heavy. So how can I create enough stress to actually get a hypertrophic response? Because I've lost 20 pounds post-surgery. I really want to be able to train pain-free, but also see some progress. So we came up with this system, 8x8, 8 sets of 8 reps with 30-second rest and 3-second negatives, things that recruit into muscle micro-tearing, time under tension, truncated rest periods to exacerbate metabolic stress, and all that stuff. And with just 40% of a 1-rep max, which is you could warm up with 40%, right? And I was shocked that after the 12 weeks, I was like, holy shit, I got 25 pounds of mass on me, eating a caloric surplus and doing this program with all light lifting. And so that was the first book. Now, with that first book, it's a great introduction because it's super simple. It's super light.
That's how I started.
It's the easiest entry point for people. 3 days a week, right? You just train 3 days a week. And I like it for people coming off of injury, people new to hypertrophy training. I love it for young athletes who are learning how to lift because it's submaximal load with slow and controlled movement. It's also great for blending with CrossFit because you can still do it and do CrossFit on the other days. As long as it's not more heavy lifting stuff. And so that was the first, but kind of got Thundrbro going. And since then, we actually we took that book. One of the pieces of feedback we got was it's fun. It's wickedly effective. We have people that have put on tons of muscle doing it. We had a guy who lost 100 pounds doing it. And I'm it's kind of funny. It's a Get Huge program, but he totally compensated his body, lost a lot of fat, but also gained a lot of lean muscle mass, even though his weight was way down. And then, because it's 3 months of kind of the same thing, I was we need to rewrite this and get rid of the monotony and make it a progression. So this whole past year, I spent writing this new book, which is crushing it right now, which is the Get Huge program reloaded. And what we did now is we just made it a 3-month progression, starting with lightweight and then moving up towards heavier and heavier loading. So this is just
nice.
Aggressive stuff. All these dips are deload weeks. We also put in, because it could get really long. We truncated it to just 4 progressive overload movements each day and then 2 finishers. So the finishers, methods and the mechanisms that are like the really cool methods, but are a little bit more advanced. So you see that like in our Muscle Anarchy program. But what I wanted to do was give people at least some exposure to some of these really cool methods like overload eccentrics, isometrics, drop sets, partials, supersets, all these really nasty things where you cannot just take a heavy weight. It's not about taking a heavy weight and making it feel easy, but a lot of these things, these mechanisms are about taking light weights and making them really, really challenging and really hard via some of these principles we incorporate.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how the whole thing started.
Yeah. I mean, you went past where I was asking, and that's okay. I figured you would. I appreciate it. I mean, I want to dive into all of that. And yeah, that program was my introduction. And I would say, yes, it was it was very intense. It was sort of quote unquote longer than an hour a day. And yes, and then I jumped into Muscle Anarchy. I've tested it all out, and I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask you, this is sort of one of the bigger questions that I like to know, is that there's so many different variations of fitness in the world today. There's so many different types of programs, all that sort of stuff. And like you said, it's very common to hear stories about, I tried this program for a while, didn't like him, I got banged up, led to an injury, et cetera, et cetera. How does someone find the right balance, the right program, like without just, is it always just, is the answer always going to be trial and error? Like you just have to try it, see how it goes and move on to something. Because we all know that each body is going to be different and CrossFit isn't for everyone. And some people might be good in CrossFit for X amount of time, maybe longer, doesn't matter. But like, how do people navigate? Like, how does the weekend warrior or the person that isn't a high level athlete, how do they find and navigate that?
I think there's a lot of variables in there that you could kind of consider. The first one is like, what do you want and how fast do you want it? Right. That's like, the first, what are you chasing? Right. Like, cause your program will look a little different, right? If you were there and you're like, hey, you know what? I want to be like as big as possible, as muscular as possible. I don't care about my fitness. That dictates a certain training and nutritional protocol versus like, hey, I'm trying to kind of balance general physical fitness with physicality. That probably looks like a little more like a compromise, or even all the way down to be like, you know what, I only pursue general physical fitness, but I want to like complement this stuff a little bit into my program so I can address some weaknesses or some areas of injury. But I think that the problem is that, you're always changing, you're always evolving. So what's the best program for you? It really probably depends on where you're at right now. When I was in my early 20s, CrossFit was fun. It really didn't matter what I did in my early 20s. I'd probably respond to it, like my body could handle it. It was okay. I was still seeing improvement and this and that. As you get older, you realize like, you know what? I don't really respond well to that, or that's not a good idea for me. I typically injure myself doing something like that, or it doesn't serve my goals, right? So it's like one of the things I found that, as I was in CrossFit and I started exploring hypertrophy, people tried to peer pressure me into their training goals, right? They tried to be like, well, what about the open? Like, aren't you concerned about, no, I don't care about the open, like, I don't, I just want to look awesome naked and not be hurt, and still be able to do stuff, but like, I don't care. Or, even training methodologies. Well, Greg said this and Greg said that. And I'm like, yeah, but like, do you want to look like Greg? or whatever, So,
yeah,
it evolves as you go. But I think there are some things as an athlete that you can always think about, which is what program, and this goes for all decisions in and around training, what program allows me to accumulate the most quality, high-value repetition. So a quality, high-value repetition is something where you're moving well with good orthopedic integrity. You're building positional strength, you're keeping yourself safe, and good intensity, right? Where you're pushing yourself to the point where there's going to be an adaptation because you're able to flirt with the failure of the muscle. What program allows me to accumulate the most amount of those quality, high value repetitions over very, very long periods of time? Not a day, not a week, not a year, but over years, right? What allows you to do that consistently over years? Because that's really where any type of remarkable progress is going to take place. Progress over a week, a lot of people they'll do a program, they'll see improvement, and then they'll plateau and come back down because they're not able to consistently be able to push that intensity and the quality repetitions. And I joke with Cam, I'm like, man, if I could have just like pulled back like 20% on the intensity, I probably could have done it for a lot longer. If I just didn't go as heavy as possible or as fast as possible, I just went, kind of fast, I probably could have kept going, but that's just not my personality. That's the things I love about fitness is like pushing yourself. And like I said, just that adrenaline response of like taking yourself to the point of failure. I just got to find a way to do it safely, you know? And so CrossFit was not the answer for that specifically. We still incorporate CrossFit into our program,
sure,
but it's like a very nice user-friendly version of CrossFit. You've probably seen it in our like conditioning workouts where like nothing is like the hypertrophy training is where we develop size and strength. That's the resistance, the heavy mechanical loading. In the conditioning is conditioning. It's meant to get your heart rate up. It's meant to practice good athletic movements. It's meant to build some stamina and capacity. But like, we're not doing like super high skill squat snatches and muscle ups because, you know, for a lot of people, that's just going to affect their ability to accumulate quality repetitions over time. So we'll practice more foundational stuff, the push-ups and pull-ups, you know, all that kind of stuff that you still get a great training effect from, but doesn't quite have the same level of risk. And, you know, as we have so many people now in our program, I've realized that like, well, some people still want to pursue that fitness at an elite level. So we come up with scaling options for the workouts where they're like 3 levels, don't hurt me a little, and I want to burn. So if you're a psychopath, you know, you can I want to burn option and get like a CrossFit Games level workout. But if you're like me, or probably most of our people, you just do the don't hurt don't hurt me or hurt me a little, and you're able. Now I'm like, you know, what's nice is, you know, you can put down long periods of time where you're not getting the hiccups, right? You're not getting injuries, you're not getting banged up. You can still progressively push yourself. And then a lot of that also comes into the formula of the program, allowing for that stress recovery, right? Allowing for the healing and remodeling of tissues and hormones so that you can actually see progress, because that was one of my second big criticisms of CrossFit as I saw over time. It's like the reason why people are not getting improvement is because they're never even getting the chance to adapt, right? It's like back squats Monday, back squats Wednesday. It's just intensity. And I'm like, where does the adaptation take place? After a certain point, when you're out of that honeymoon period, where do you get the time to allow the micro tearing of muscles to heal and remodel? You know, when do you get the time to let the tremendous stress hormones like cortisol, when do you give that a chance to actually come back to a normal state so you can be anabolic? So, you know, it's not what you're doing, but how you're doing it that actually makes the most difference. Because like I mentioned, like the functional movements are magical. Like everyone should be practicing them.
Right.
But it has to be done like any potent prescription. It has to be done responsibly.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love. That's what I really like about where we are right now in fitness. Like your program, there's other like Marcus Philly, there's Nick Bear, there's hybrid fitness more or less, right? We're plucking from the good parts of like what we call, I guess, strength and conditioning, something like Olympic lifting, endurance, you know, the basic principles of fitness. And then you kind of pull it all in to build this sort of program that's sort of a hybrid of everything. It doesn't have to be one sort of perspective. And I think back to like, you know, when my dad, he was a bodybuilder back in the day. And I know like 90s bodybuilding, right? Chalky protein powder, raw eggs, Stallone, Arnold steroids, all that sort of stuff. It didn't seem like it was in the state of longevity, right? It was just like, didn't really seem healthy on the outside looking in, right? But it seems like our culture is more focused on like balanced lifestyle and like a balanced program.
Where CrossFit came from, right? I mean, it started with like, you know, I don't know what the exact story is, but like Greg got kicked out of Gold's Gym. Okay.
Right.
You know,
right.
Probably had people crawling on the rafters or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like you look at it, like I was mentioning, like you go to the regular gym and you see just like a bunch of people on machines, not working hard and not getting results. So it's a whole model based on January 1st, right? January 1st, as many times as you can. By January 29th, half of them aren't even showing up anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's not a great model. It's also not a great model for the trainer because, you know, trainers, you couldn't really have much of a career in training being like a trainer at a club gym. You really either had to have your own gym or your own product. You know, the people making in fitness were like Billy Blanks with Taibo kickboxing.
Yeah. P90X.
Tony Jordan, who's got his, you know, P90X DVDs. But other than that, you know, you're kind of living a life of poverty as a trainer. And now it's like, well, no, if you're a trainer, you're the practitioner, you know, you can create your own community around you by having your own small group fitness model. And, it's, in training, right? In like, you look at like club gyms like Equinox, right? That's a high level club gym in New York, or a New York Sports Club, or this and that. There's people that have memberships to these gyms. I don't know what the membership price points are, but it's usually like between like maybe $29 and $59 or something. Maybe it's more expensive at Equinox. And that model is based on just getting as many signups as you can.
Yes.
Thousands of members, most of them don't show. The one member in that model that is the most pain in the ass member is the group exercise class attendee. So it's the person who is in the gym every day, is always complaining, oh, the spin bike is broken, the yoga blocks are getting old. Like, they're taking advantage of these small group classes, which are being offered to them for free in these club gyms for $59 a month. And then we take that model and we flip it upside down and say, oh, you like spin class? Well, how about this? We're going to do Soul Cycle, and it's going to be spin class with disco balls. And instead of you paying $59 a month, how about you pay $30 a class? Because now this is a part of your identity. Like you're a Soul Cycle athlete. You're a CrossFit. So like that just totally flips it on its head, and it takes that pain in the ass member and makes them your most lucrative member, to be able to draw from. And so I think that's what you see kind of across the industry, is you see that with Orange Theory Fitness, with Bar Method. I mean, you name it, all these little studios where they're creating mini communities and taking that price model and being like, oh no, now it's a small group training model, right? Where it's like you can pay, you could do a one-on-one session with me, Chad, for, whatever, $100 an hour. Or you can pay $200 a month to be in a group of 5 people that you're getting the same amount of attention. And by the way, you're probably pushing harder because you don't want to look like a biatch, So it's an interesting evolution. But that old model is being graduated, it's right. And it's having to slowly evolve.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have to ask you, since we're talking about it, what is your view on the future of fitness? Like, we went through COVID, right? We saw the introduction of virtual everything and home gyms and garage gyms, taking a peak. Now we're kind of come down to like a normal level. What does the next 5 years look like? We have all these group training, like these very niche, like boutique type of fitness popping up everywhere. What is your take on sort of the future of fitness?
Well, good gyms will always do well. Whether you're a club gym or a CrossFit gym or a powerlifting gym, because they're there for the program and the community. And as the owner and operator, that's something you can control, right? So if people feel like they're part of your family. And it's one of the things that's hard with online training is like, I'm not there with the athlete. So I try to find any opportunity to interact with them, to give them a little bit more, to make them feel like they're part of the club, part of the team, and, if you can do that well, then you're going to have a great business no matter what you're doing. Nothing trumps being.
When's the first Thundrbro gym opening up?
Yes.
Let's go. That'd be awesome.
First Thundrbro affiliate in Massachusetts. I remember our program assistant, Justin, opened a gym, and he's running the first one. And Cammie and I are now moving offices. So typically we've been working out of our house. We got offices that we're opening up in CrossFit West Chase down here in Tampa. So we'll have another kind of secondary location. That'll eventually happen. But write to us if you want to open up. For us, we're actually right now designing the education, because my background is honestly mostly education. I've taught 400 seminars over a decade on fitness. Like, education for me is really my sweet spot. And so we're creating a whole educational system in which we can actually create like Thundrbro coaches. And those are the people that we would, try to give the license to go.
That's great.
But anyways, back to the question, like where is it going? Good gyms will always do well. I think that overall, we're going to see a lot of people, and folks, if you're out there and you're a gym owner or an avid CrossFitter, you take this with a grain of salt, please. But I think we're going to see a lot of people leave CrossFit and move towards other methodologies that better serve their needs and goals. And so I think that could look like, programs like Thundrbro. There are even like, club gyms. Like, I went to a gym in Colorado called Armbrust Pro Gym. And it's a kind of a club gym, but it's privately owned, and it has this awesome community and culture. It's the same thing. It's a fraternity. Like, you create a great fraternity in your gym, people are going to love being there. And so I think we'll see a lot of people kind of moving towards that stuff. And I think just in general, we're seeing, my same journey of going from like, I want to be an elite athletic performer to like, I'd like to be pretty good, but I really want to look awesome,
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot of that type of stuff, a lot of crossover, being one of the first, one of the first CrossFit athletes to go from, competing at CrossFit to competing at USA Nationals in bodybuilding. Like I got a lot of pushback from the bodybuilding community about like how silly CrossFitters are, just the same way you get pushback about how silly bodybuilders are. And the truth is now I got a lot of them doing some more fun athletic stuff because I think the idea of physical culture is what's most appealing to me. Pursuing these things at the highest level is not a healthy thing, whether it's CrossFit or bodybuilding or, winning the New York State Marathon or whatever. Like, it's not going to be a healthy thing, but I like the idea of being able to play in all fields, and I think that idea of physical culture is that the most athletic guys and girls are also the best looking, and performance and aesthetics are tied together. And there's a reason why elite athletes look like elite athletes. And for a population of people where 99% of folks are going into a gym because they want to look good and feel good, but usually they say look good first, we should be able to deliver that. We should be able to get people into the best aesthetics of their life and not diminish it as a goal or say like mirrors are silly. Mirrors are not silly. Mirrors are one of the most rewarding things that you can have. It's where you can evaluate your physical progress, and you should be proud of your work and you should be able to wear that work on your body. But there's, it's not either or, it's both together. It's form and function.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's totally true. Like the local gym that we have here, Limitless Performance, not a CrossFit affiliate. There's a huge group, like I think almost 100 members in the group now do endurance and Ironman and triathlon training. That just started during COVID. There's a big group of let's call them CrossFit athletes. They do the gymnastics, all this stuff, and then it's just basic strength programming. So I love the idea of hybrid. Like in the past 3 years, I've done CrossFit, I've done Thundrbro, I've done a golf rotational program. Like I love the idea of being able to kind of hybrid it all to try to find just like your own best physical self. So I love that.
Yeah. And it's fun to take on new challenges. Like,
it keeps it fresh. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I was acutely aware of, just in terms of where I knew I wanted to go as a coach and as a business, was just understanding that difference between knowledge and information, right? So information is stuff you can read in a book, right? I can take out, Brad's Science of Muscle Hypertrophy book and read it and say, the optimal rep range is 8 to 12 repetitions and blah, 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 And a lot of people in the fitness industry do that. They just regurgitate information. Yep. They're basically like, they're like actors. Okay. It's just like reading a script. And then there's knowledge, and knowledge doesn't come as easy, right? Knowledge comes by doing. Knowledge comes by practicing. So, if I was going to say like, hey, I'm going to be the functional hypertrophy expert. I'm going to be the expert on blending bodybuilding with CrossFit. I think I have the knowledge in CrossFit, having been in there for so long, competed, teaching decades, like I've probably taught, well, a lot of people listening to this podcast have probably taken a course by me. Okay. So that credibility and that knowledge was there. When I started getting into hypertrophy, I was thinking, you know what? I cannot bullshit this. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do. They're like, I'm a bodybuilding expert, but they don't really know bodybuilding. They mimic bodybuilding, but they've never done it. Bodybuilding is a whole can of worms, and you're not bodybuilding until you're preparing to get on stage, right? You're going through a period of accumulation where you're gaining mass, size, and symmetry, and then you're bringing out muscular definition and trying to peel down and shrink fat cells and hold on to your muscle and bring out things like muscle separation, vascularity, muscle striation. Like that stuff like is bodybuilding, and it's all very, very hard. And the hardest thing about it is not what's inside the gym, but it's the lifestyle around it, to be able to take your body to a level that it doesn't want to normally or naturally go. And then being able to present that on stage and being able to actually show that like you didn't just get ready for a show, but you've seen improvement over years, and you can take that and repeat it with athletes. And so like, I think that piece to me was so important to compete in bodybuilding and get street credibility in bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, this guy's a top national competitor who's competed in every men's bodybuilding category. So he's not just talking the talk, like he actually knows what he's doing, and he has a level of respect for both that community and CrossFit, because there are a lot of people out there that are going to say, like, I did bodybuilding. And so many CrossFitters, like I was telling you, Chad, like so many CrossFitters think they've done bodybuilding. They're like, oh yeah, I used to go and do leg extensions, 3 sets of 10, and it just didn't really work for me. That's not bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is really fucking hard. But here's the silver lining on it. As a CrossFitter, you learn so many valuable skills. And the most valuable skills you learn are how to move. So you know how to do these high value, complex functional movements. You know how to deadlift properly, to back squat, to press. Like, you know, you understand how to do these things where you get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, out of these high utility movements. And you also know how to work really hard. Like you'll do pull-ups until your fucking hands bleed. Now, all we need to do is take those skills and channel them in the right direction where you're doing things on purpose with purpose, and you see massive progress. So as a CrossFitter, kind of going back to bodybuilding, but then understanding these things, utilizing whatever, you know, like our program is kind of a hybrid where you get the functional movements and that. But even if you went back to doing leg presses or leg extensions, you would be so much better at it, because you know how to push. And like the body, it does one thing. Like the body is designed to survive. And that survival mechanism is the catalyst for adaptation. So if you're able to get uncomfortable and do that consistently, you're going to get really big changes. This needs to be the right type of stress. And there needs to be the right kind of lifestyle around it. So I think for me, like blending that with kind of functional fitness was a great jumping off point. But even now that I've competed in bodybuilding, and you can kind of see, just like CrossFit, the excessiveness of doing it at the highest level and how that's not really what I want. Now Camille and I are like signing up for marathons, and I want to be like the biggest, most muscular marathoner, or you know what I mean? So it's still like, it's performance and aesthetics, but now you can play in different fields. And like, yes, you should be able to step on stage and look awesome, or enter a powerlifting meet, or run a 10K. Like you should be able to play on all sides of the fence. Yeah. That idea of physical culture is the difference between an individual methodology and just someone who is like just seeking to see the wonders of what their body can do. And what is that highest level of that highest baseline level that you can maintain in terms of performance and composition and strength and all these things that you can just kind of live there always, whether you're running a marathon or doing a bodybuilding show or competing at the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
Cammie saying something. Was it? So Cammie, you did. Cammie has like, she's a little late to the party, okay? Because like I took the jump first, and then she followed me. So she's been on stage too as a bikini.
I was going to say she was still competing, yeah.
She was still competing, and I was like, yeah. And by the way, like I'm not going to name any names here, but like when I was still like in CrossFit, teaching seminars, coaching Cammie for CrossFit Games, competing, all that stuff. And I started saying like, hey, I'm doing a bodybuilding show. I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. People thought it was like a joke. They were laughing. And it was and they were laughing at me. And then like, is he serious? Are you serious? What is he doing? And then same people, I guarantee, Chad, this is the funny thing, the same people that were laughing at me circled back, and they were like, hey, I think I want to do that.
No, for sure. I mean, I think you've done a great job. Very much. I'm sure it was very difficult and intimidating to try to go into a new area without that street credibility, right? So like, good for you for like jumping and learning about it and actually like building up the case that like you can do it. And I think you did it the right way. And I think we're in good hands in this, in the sense of like being able to get to this level of like doing all sorts of different types of fitness tests or doing all sorts of different balanced fitness. Because I think folks like you that kind of just don't just say I can do it and I did it. They actually, you dive into it and learn about it and actually like walk the walk kind of thing, right? So I think that's like kudos to you. And I want to talk about hypertrophy a little bit. Like what, like I guess for the listeners, like what are the benefits for sort of the weekend warrior or for anybody to sort of either do a hypertrophy program or to sprinkle in hypertrophy and an accessory type of thing for maybe someone that might be an endurance athlete or maybe someone who's a CrossFitter, who knows. But like, What are the big benefits that you see that you've learned and that you're teaching about the hypertrophy sort of aspect of training?
Well, first off, we kind of speak with a certain level of vernacular that can sometimes be over people's heads. So let's start by saying hypertrophy is the method, or the mechanism by which muscles grow. When a cell increases in size beyond its normal size, it's gone through hypertrophy. And that growth can come from a number of places. It can come from stress, from hormonal stimulation, or from an increased workload. For the sake of what we're talking about, we're referring to hypertrophy of the striated skeletal muscle, the muscle that puts action on bones. Because there's all different types of muscles in your body. There are muscles like your tongue, your heart, your internal intestines have muscle. We're talking about the muscle that puts action on bones, the ones that are striated. And what we want to see out of that is an increased cross-sectional size and strength of muscles. So as muscles become bigger, they become thicker, they become stronger, and their tensile strength increases so that you can then apply more force to whatever it is you're doing, whether you're pressing a barbell or jumping up as high as you can or whatever it is. Your contractile potential refers to how well you're able to recruit your muscle. So it's kind of thinking about like the software, like how well is your brain communicating with your body in terms of inter and intramuscular coordination? Like how hard and strong can a muscle fiber contract, and how does it coordinate with the other fibers to be able to express maximum power? What we're referring to is not the neurological pieces, but the biological pieces of the actual cross-sectional size and strength of a muscle fiber. And when a muscle fiber grows, typically you'll see things like muscle micro-tearing. So those are acute, large tears in the sarcolemma, the outer membrane sheath of a muscle fiber, the one that insulates it. When you do something like heavy loading, especially heavy loading as a muscle is lengthening in what we call an eccentric type of movement, where you can kind of think of the phases of movement as eccentric is when muscles lengthen, concentric is when they shorten. Mm-hmm. So anytime that you're losing the fight, that would be an eccentric movement. Well, when you're controlling that eccentric lengthening under load, you're able to accumulate damage to muscle fibers like muscle micro-tearing, and also damage to the myosin and actin bonds in the internal components of a muscle fiber. These are the proteins that hook onto each other and shorten to be able to get a muscle to contract. And when those bonds are damaged, the body is, it wants to survive. So that adaptation process allows them to heal and remodel thicker and more numerous, or contain what they call myogenesis, which is an increased number and size of those myosin and actin bonds. So I always compare it to Velcro. If you ever look closely at a piece of Velcro, there's always one side with a bunch of little hooks and another piece of felt, and the hooks hook onto the felt. Well, when you're those myosin and actin bonds are like the felt and the hooks. And when you damage those fibers and you get myogenesis, now there are more hooks, but those hooks are thicker and stronger, so they can contract harder. So that's where increased performance integrates with hypertrophy. Right? I hope I wasn't using too many big words there. But yeah, bigger and stronger go together. There's no denying that. Obviously, you want to get the most out of your neurology, right? You want to tap things out, and there's always a component of just like kinesthetic awareness and increasing your inter and intramuscular coordination. But from a biological standpoint, it's just building the size and strength of muscles.
Okay. And outside of like the physical goals for hypertrophy type training, is there other, you were talking about before, functional fitness, the idea of functional fitness and hypertrophy. So like, what are the advantages and sort of benefits that you see from outside of just the physical force, like from a functional fitness or a performance base, or is it just like you're getting stronger, so you're getting stronger, or is it going to be, I get bigger, I'm going to be less mobile? Am I going to still retain, my positioning in a functional fitness level?
If I'm answering this question honestly, Chad, and I look at myself and my athletes and like what was the biggest benefit of incorporating this type of training into a program, it's injury prevention. By far number one. It's always the feedback I get. For the first time, I feel like I can train hard and not get hurt, right? And so, the idea of creating a program where you can progressively overload muscles and push intensity without getting banged up, I think that to me is the number one benefit. And a reason why you might incorporate this. When you've hit a plateau, when you're constantly injured, when you're really getting broken down and you get that defeatist attitude. Like, I guess it's all downhill from here. I guess I'm getting older. There's no more, my back squat's going down. I'm always kind of hurt. Like, things are moving in the wrong direction. We talk about that spectrum of fitness, right? And what is it? We use all these bottles in CrossFit, like sick, well, and fit. And I'm like, it's kind of sliding past wellness. Like when that work capacity that we want to get up as early as possible and as high as possible starts to decline, to me, this is the answer. This is the unexplored room, and this is where the most opportunity is. Like, the opportunity is not in getting like a little bit better position of a squat snatch or learning how to move a little bit quicker. Like, those improvements are fractional and marginal, and they really don't represent much physical change. This is the biggest opportunity, the biggest room for growth is just increasing the physical size of the muscle fibers. And along with that, there's also, for all of our athletes, huge room for improvement in terms of their body composition. Because just like we've kind of just scratched the surface with functional movements, it's like, you meet people where they're at, right? If I had somebody who's never trained before, just the act of setting foot in a gym is going to give them improvement. They can lift soup cans if they want. It doesn't matter what type of training they do, at least they're training. But as you gain capacity, now you got to be a little bit smarter, a little bit better. The same thing applies to nutrition. It's like, I think CrossFitters, like from a nutritional perspective, are doing some things right. Like they're not eating the traditional Western diet. They're not eating pizza and soda, at least most of the time they're not. But they're eating more whole foods, high utility, available micro and macronutrients, things with good bioavailability, things that are good for increasing insulin sensitivity and health markers in general. Like, I think that's a great idea to have a diet that has a lot of good, high quality whole foods. But they've just scratched the surface with that. One of the things that has been a big understanding moment for me, moving to hypertrophy and bodybuilding, kind of understanding the overlap between these two, is that, like, the same way you need to push yourself in the gym, right? Like, you got to put a little bit more weight on the bar. You got to try to do one more repetition. You got to push yourself to failure a little bit harder to continue to adapt. I think everyone's on board for that. But when it comes to nutrition, it's exactly the same. If you're trying to get your body to move, it's got to be a little uncomfortable to get there, whether you're gaining mass or whether you're trying to shrink the size of fat cells. Like, you to get that stress response, that adaptation, you got to be a little bit hungry, or you got to be a little bit tired. Like, that's just your body telling you that's the right amount of stress to get it to move. And so that level of precision and accuracy becomes so much more important now in terms of tracking macronutrients and not using some kind of blanket prescription like, well, I eat paleo. Be like, that's great. That's good enough to get you to a certain point. But now what about all this unexplored area that you haven't even tapped into yet? So that is like a whole nother can of worms to open up and get into in terms of like where the evolution and the improvement lies.
Yes.
And I think as time goes by, I think slowly, just like now, it's kind of seeping into the community. It's like, hey, we do a little tempo training here and there with our CrossFit stuff. That type of precision and accuracy, that type of information that we know, like as in bodybuilding, it's like what you do outside the gym is more important than what you're doing inside the gym.
For sure.
Your internal chemistry, your energy status is going to dictate which way your body is moving way more than whether you did 15 or 12 repetitions that day. So
for sure.
So I think that's going to slowly, people are going to start to understand that. I think we're going to see more CrossFitters. And I know even in Thundrbro, we have more and more CrossFitters doing their first bodybuilding show to get that experience or to get that knowledge. Because, like, if you want to know how good you can look, if you're like, I wonder how awesome I can look, like, what am I capable of? Mm-hmm. That's the best way to find out. Nothing will create a better sense of fear, desperation, and anxiety than knowing at a certain date, at a certain time, at a certain place, you're going to be naked on a stage with a bunch of jack dudes and a panel of judges looking to pick you apart in front of a crowd of people. It's not hard to stick to your diet. It's not hard to stick to your training with that level of desperation hanging over you. And so to me, I think everyone should get a chance to experience that, to understand, like, if you wanted to get the very most out of your aesthetics, what would that look like? And now that you've been to that extreme, where can you comfortably live? Just by downshifting.
Yes.
And that's that baseline I was talking about. It's like just increasing that baseline.
Yeah. I want to talk about nutrition, but before that, I'm glad that you talked about hypertrophy is like injury prevention. great hearing that the community says the same thing. And when I was doing the muscle and anchored programming, like my squat is not my best lift. I'm 6'5", 220 pounds. I'm not the best squatter, but I would say doing low weight, high volume, my squat never felt better, right, from a movement perspective. And for sure, I wouldn't say like I didn't necessarily test like 1 rep max or anything like that, but I for sure felt stronger in that position. So I would definitely agree with that type of programming, helping out in that way and injury prevention. But I wanted to jump into like this idea of like, what is it? Like first, maybe let's start off. You went through a number of different injuries. It sounds like you had a pretty critical injury that kind of moved you from CrossFit into figuring out how to rehab properly. How like, and I probably say most people in the fitness industry have an injury at some point, whether it's minimal setback or a major injury like yourself. How did you face such a significant injury and come out the other end? And it sounds like in a better way. I'm sure I always look at injuries as like more of a mental test than a physical test in most cases. How did you do that? Like, how did you look at that and just go through that and get through that? Because oftentimes even when I get banged up, it's just like, man, it's like, it feels like the end of the world, even though it's not. We make it a bigger deal in our heads than it probably is. But I would love your insight on sort of how do you get through injuries? How do you approach injuries, knowing that injuries, do happen? Obviously you have the answer for preventing injuries with Thundrbro, but.
So first off,
it's a big question.
You, Chad, myself, probably most of the listeners out there, we're probably very similar in that we get a tremendous amount of joy in expressing our bodies athletically, right? We talked about at the very beginning, it's like, well, sports was my safe place, right? We get so much joy in being able to use our bodies and pursue athleticism and do these really fun. This is my happy place, right? And so when that gets taken away from you or gets, hurt in some way, it is emotionally hurtful to you. So it's a totally normal response to be like bummed out. Like people who don't care about fitness probably don't get bummed out if they get injured. They're like, excuse to not train.
Yes, sit on the couch, Netflix and chill.
To get out of gym class.
Yeah, gonna binge on some movies.
Yeah, exactly. Netflix and chill,
Let's do it.
Like for you or me or most of the people listening, it probably kind of like feels like taking the wind out of your sails. You're like,
100%.
I was just getting momentum. I was really excited about that leg day coming up next week. And all of a sudden, click. And I can't tie my shoes. Like my back is hurt or my shoulders hurt or what, insert injury here. But the longer you do this, you realize that if you are of that personality where you are pursuing things, right, and you're pushing yourself, you're going to experience injuries. Like, race car drivers, they always they're gonna hit the wall sometimes. You're gonna get banged up. Some are worse than others. Some injuries you're fine in a day or two. Some injuries take months to recover from. And so I think first it's like, that understand that emotional response is normal. That's fine. That just means you care, and it's because it's near and dear to you. But don't let that get in the way of your goals, right? You can still pursue things. So many times, like when you get injured, you end up focusing on what you can't do, right? I'm like, I hurt my back. I can't deadlift. I can't back squat. How am I going to train? I can't do heavy weightlifting. It's just, you become this very defeatist kind of mentality, and you are unable to see the opportunities in front of you. Because if you ask yourself, what can I do? Well, I can work on this thing that I've always kind of been avoiding, or I can't do, fix this issue, which is why the problem originally happened. Like I had a buddy who tore his pec. He was an Olympia competitor, tore his pec. He was super bummed out. And he was just like, so sad. And I was like, dude, your legs are going to be so good. And so like, just let go of the emotion, take it for what it is. I think so many times we focus on how we perceive things versus what really is, right? What is, okay, well, you can't do this, but you can do that. So do that. When it comes to managing injury, first thing you do is you eliminate the pain generating movement. So you take the stuff out that's going to hurt you. You find ways to continue to train because movement is healing. So you got to keep moving. Don't stop training, but keep yourself moving. That will only accelerate the healing process. And then you need to find ways to address that injury with some type of therapy or intervention or something to kind of fix it up or keep it from happening again. If you're doing those things, every time you get injured, you usually come out better. You usually come out stronger. You usually learn a little something. And I've had injuries that have been major and minor. The most major is the back injury. And that was like scary, probably scariest because, I was losing feeling in my legs. And so I was like, am I going to be able to walk? Is this going to affect me the rest of my life? Like, that was really scary to face that. But then, like sometimes the intervention is rehab. Sometimes the intervention is back surgery. And, when I had the back surgery, I kind of went into it like most people kind of bummed out. Like I was excited. I was like, man, I get to experience this. I'm going to have athletes that are going to experience it too. I'm going to be able to talk them through it and to relate to them. I'm going to get to, the doctor's going to tell me it's going to be 6 months to recover. I know I'm going to do it in 2. Like, it's going to be it's going to be cool. It's going to be a whole new adventure. Like a Mori Fati, right? Like, our fate, we should love it. We should love our fate. So it's all, whether it's good or bad, those are things that we assign to it, right? So yeah, I kind of like, I wasn't bummed out at all about the back surgery. I was excited about it. I was like, I'm going to get to be healed up. I'm going to be better. I'm going to learn a ton. I'm going to become stronger. And when I'm through this, like, wow, how lucky am I to live in a place where a surgery intervention is available to me. Like somebody can fix me. 2, I can afford it. I have insurance that's going to cover it. And 3, I have a support system to help me through it. I also don't have to stop working either. I do my work on a computer. Like, how lucky am I where if this happened in a different time, in a different place, you're fucked. So,
okay.
So yeah, I think that like, it's just all about like your perspective on it and focusing on what you can do and finding ways to make it a victory. Post surgery, I remember Cam was with me. Very hard surgery, like challenging recovery, 2 weeks on your back on a couch, couldn't get up, couldn't go to the bathroom. So Cam would have to like take this portable urinal and like, let me pee or whatever. But you're stuck on your back and I'm looking up at the ceiling and I'm going, gosh, you're so lucky. You've been given this new lease on life. You're maybe not now, but in the near future, you're going to be walking around pain-free, able to feel your legs, able to start training again. How are you going to honor that? Like, how are you going to give that the respect that it deserves? Are you going to just go back to doing what you were doing before and not change anything and end up back on the surgery table, just kind of like squander that gift? Or are you going to use this as a catalyst to evolve and to become something more, to make it a strength? So, I was thinking like, what do I want to do when I can train again? I could compete in CrossFit, and I'm like, oh, that's appealing. I'm competing in CrossFit. Like, no, it's going to get me hurt again. Like maybe powerlifting, I can be really strong. And that's my 1 rep max bench press. And I'm like, nah, that's probably going to pop the tendon off the bone. Okay, so like, what about bodybuilding? Like I've never really done it before. I've never really explored it before. And that's when my nose ended up in the textbooks and I started just trying to surround myself with great minds in hypertrophy. And I was lucky that I lived in a place out in Colorado where I had access to Armbrust Pro Gym, where I could hang out with Phil Heath every day and a lot of those high-level trainers that could just teach me all the ins and outs and intricacies of bodybuilding. I was just be a fucking sponge. Like it was all a gift. And there's a book called The Gift of Injury, and I think I haven't read it, but I imagine it says it's a big thing, right? I've seen it before, and I think probably that's that might be. I haven't read the book sleeve yet, but that probably would be the premise of something like that. Is like,
well, I think I'm going to clip this for sure and send it to anybody that has an injury because I think that's an amazing outlook, and I know that I'm sure there was dark days that you went through, but like that's a great message, and I mean. Yeah, I mean, kudos to you again.
Listen, when you're out there and you're injured and you're trying to come back, right? It's hard enough. It's hard enough to bend over and try to put your shoes on when your back is killing you and have the anxiety of like, which movement am I going to do that's not going to fuck me up? And to be able to like get in the car and make the effort, like it's painful. It's hard enough. Don't waste your time feeling sorry for yourself. That's just wasted energy. Like I said, like it's hard enough. Don't waste your time, with unnecessary emotional energy that's just going to take you away. You put on your big boy pants, you put on your adult version of your, your ego, and you just go get it done.
Yeah, no, amazing. I know we're almost at time. I got a few questions left. I think we're going to have to do a part 2 for this for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you. I was thinking about this. Me and my wife were talking the other day about like, it feels like recovery, the the idea of recovery is at its peak, right? We have mobility apps, we have programs, we have podcast talk, we have knowledge bombs and podcasts of information all about recovery. We have cold tub companies coming up every single month. Percussion guns, you can buy them at any single place, probably buy them at a 7-Eleven. And, you know, PTs and sport doctors are sort of thriving in business. Do you feel that we're sort of becoming reliant on recovery? And are we like in our training, we're overdoing it, knowing that we can just quote unquote, like fix it later? Like, do you feel like recovery is becoming this sort of Band-Aid, or is it something that you have practiced for a long time and you think it's an essential part of becoming an optimal sort of human?
Well, you can only grow as much as you can recover, and there's no such thing as overtrained. There's only under-recovered, right? So I think it is good to invest in that, but I don't think you need to go down like it's the cart before the horse in a lot of cases. You see it with things like nutrition too. Can you just do the simple things well? You know, can you just do the simple things well? Are you getting the right amount of nutrients in your diet to fuel your cells and give them all the things for your internal chemistry to be able to heal and remodel? Your body wants to heal. It wants to survive. So are you giving it what it needs to do that? Are you getting good, deep, restful sleep every night? Are you getting 9 hours of blackout sleep? Are you getting up 3 times to pee? Are you drinking enough during the day? Are you getting enough hydration to hydrate your cells to add to the elasticity of tendons and the synovial fluid in your joints? These are the simple things, and you don't need to buy the $800 massage gun to do it either. The other stuff, like, I think a lot of this is marketing. A lot of this is money making. I'm sure there's some science behind it. But, you know, honestly, it's never one thing. It's never one thing. It's not training. It's not diet. It's not nutrition. But it's like 100 fucking things you do every day to stack the deck in your favor to try to be, you know, superhuman. And like, you know, if there was an easy pill, people would take it. And there are some pills that can be helpful. Like, you know, we can talk about testosterone, but it's not one thing. It's more of a lifestyle. It's not, you know, and it's not like a thing you do. It's more of like a habit that is who you are, right? Like that's really where these things, it's just how you live. It's not a diet. It's just like, this is the baseline. This is because it's that, you know, living those things for long periods of time is where you really see the most benefit. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do recovery. Everyone responds to something different. All the recovery devices you see out there are primarily predicated on the idea of blood flow, whether it's blood in or out of joints. That can be through massage therapy. It can be through acupuncture. It can be through hot cold contrast therapy, but it's all based on blood flow. So you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do that with stretch bands, you know, but I think the idea also is movement, right? And like all these people that are like, I'm under recovered, you know, how much movement are they actually doing every day? And not all movement needs to be intense. Like one of the things Cami and I have found is the idea of consistently doing steady state cardio throughout the day. Like, you know, we get up, we do fasted cardio every morning. I think for me, that's been the biggest contributor to recovery and energy and digestion, is just having that daily process of, like you said, you got up at 5 a.m, right? You get up and you move, you get sunlight exposure, you jump into something cold. Like it's just moving blood around.
Okay. That's great. That's great. So Dave, sorry, I know I want to be mindful of your time. How much more time do you have? Like 10 minutes?
Let me see here.
Or we can wrap it up now.
And our meeting, we always got meetings.
Yes.
I'm good until 12:15 with you.
Okay. I'll try to wrap it up in 20 minutes. I wasn't sure if we could, because I wanted to talk about supplements and nutrition. I know nutrition, we might even have a whole another podcast for nutrition we can jump into, but we can definitely jump into it.
Well, listen, I think what would make sense is like, let's wrap all these up into one, because I know a lot of guys out there especially are interested in hormone optimization, hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, and how all these things kind of integrate together. And really, like when you think about it from a macro perspective, it's all the same thing. It's all about optimizing your internal chemistry to do one thing or another. So these are, you know, everything we could talk about, there's just tools you can use.
Yeah. Okay. No, exactly. And so, yeah, let's jump into that. So yeah, so you mentioned testosterone. I know that you're very open about the conversation. I know you're also I guess when we talk about it, like there's that negative connotation about steroids, and I feel like now though there's more information when we don't talk about sport or performance and competing. When we talk about just optimizing yourself, your optimal self, I feel like there's more of a conversation about the positive signs of it and the reasons for bringing it into your sort of protocols. Obviously, you can't be sleeping 2 hours a night and then taking testosterone and think it's going to help you, right? You talked about sleep and good nutrition, all those sort of things, and like the tools that make it all work. So for you, you actively do blood work routinely to make sure that you're on top of things. Like how does someone sort of understand the benefits and also understand some of the disadvantages that's come through, and why would someone sort of look into this as an additional protocol?
Well, first off, before you start the conversation, first, forget the rules, okay? Forget the rules of your sport or what people say you're not supposed to do or this and that. Like, address first, what do you want out of your life? Number one, what do you want out of your life? For me, it's quality of life and longevity. I want to live as best I can for as long as I can. And what has been happening progressively over the course of the past 70 years is that a lot of men have started experiencing andropause earlier and earlier in their life. Andropause, just like menopause, is a suppression of sexual hormone production, specifically testosterone. Why is it happening? I don't know. Maybe it's the screens. Maybe it's the plastic. Maybe it's TikTok. I don't fucking know. But now you're seeing a lot of guys in their mid-30s testing with 250 testosterone levels. I think when I started experiencing this, and I'm completely open about it, and a lot of guys aren't, like, I think a lot of guys are willing to deal with the fact that, like, I'm getting a little bit older. Like, I'm not recovering the way that I used to, or blah, blah, blah. That didn't bother me as much. When men start experiencing erectile dysfunction, that's typically the tipping point where they are like, fuck this. No way. Like, give me the juice, whatever. Yeah. And so I think a lot of guys are afraid to talk about that stuff. I think a lot of guys feel shame about it. And, it's funny because usually from the female perspective, like, girls don't really care. They're just like, okay. But for a guy, it's a big deal. It's like, what makes you feel like a man? And so that typically is the point where I see most guys being like, you know what? I don't care about the CrossFit Open. Give me the testosterone. That, just overwhelm me. If you're in that category, great. If you're not, still, it's fine. If you just want to be optimal, that's fine. So andropause is occurring earlier and earlier in life now for whatever reason. Probably environmental factors. I see it especially in CrossFit, and I think it's because of the excessive application of intensity and what we talk about, the ability for not just tissues to heal and remodel, but for hormones to recover, because when you're constantly overstressing the body, you get systemic hormone suppression, not just testosterone, but also thyroid. You see a lot of like very sluggish thyroids, a lot of just everything, growth hormone, everything is really low. You're always in a catabolic state. Like, you're just kind of chemistry's fucked up. So, it's not just one thing you want to look at. It's really everything, but definitely, like, testosterone for a man it plays a huge part in specific types of functions, sexual performance and function, the ability to respond to training, increase muscle mass, decrease body fat, and then other subjective measures like drive, virility, vitality, hunger, right? When I started doing testosterone the first year I did it, Cammie saw a huge change in me, not just like, the physical changes were kind of slow, but immediately she's like, you were kind of like a lump on a log before. Like, you just want to kind of sleep all day and watch TV. And now, like, you're up and like, you're getting after it. And I wrote 3 books that year, and I was like, I felt so driven, I was like, it's so, I think for guys, the first thing is to find a good doctor. There are lots of good doctors out there, but I would find someone who specializes in specifically male hormone optimization. Don't go to the run-of-the-mill kind of conveyor belt clinic, because you get like, I get mail order testosterone. Don't enter into something like this lightly. It's the type of thing you got to have a conversation with your wife about it. You want to understand the risks and rewards, and especially how to manage it, and a good doctor that can kind of customize a protocol that's going to work for you, because the same way your training and nutrition evolves, so will your prescription evolve. And this stuff is not to be taken lightly, but luckily we're at the point now where longevity, regenerative medicine practices have been, going for long enough that there's some really great management systems out there to help you do this for a long time, as safe as possible, and increase your quality of life and duration. And I think like, people are always, the traditional hangups are like, one, like, am I going to lose my hair? What if I need to get off of it? Is it going to give me cardiac issues down the line? I don't want to die early. I think people don't understand that low testosterone is equally and potentially more dangerous than slightly high testosterone.
Right.
Okay. And so like with low testosterone, I'll hear guys say, well, I'm afraid to go on it because if I want to get off it, my own testosterone production is going to be shut down. And I go, oh, so it'll end up kind of like where it's at right now. So you're living your worst case scenario currently, like I might have erectile dysfunction and I'll have really suppressed testosterone. I go, well, that's you now. So, like you are the worst case scenario. So there's that one. In terms of things like hair loss, that's just going to come down to whether you're genetically predisposed to hair loss or not. It can accelerate that process. If you are, then there's some things you can maybe try to do about it. But like if you're going to lose your hair, you're going to lose your hair. In terms of cardiac issues, there's always a process of screening people. Right. So if you have like any kind of like hereditary or family risk factors, you just know you're predisposed, you certainly want to keep a close eye on yourself if you are increasing the androgens in your body, because it can cause effects like increased red blood cell production, which can sometimes increase the thickness or viscosity of your blood. So, you need to manage it a little bit, pretty carefully if you are in that category. Most people are not. In terms of, the prostate thing, like you can increase the size of your prostate. Again, that honestly comes down to genetics, whether you're predisposed to prostate cancer and a large prostate or not, puts you in a higher risk category. But, other than that, I think it's almost all reward,
Right.
And I think that for most people, it's a life-changing, game-changing thing that, it makes them a better man for themselves and for the people around them. And so when you look at it from that perspective of, there are drugs that are regenerative and there are drugs that are degenerative, depending on what you're taking and how much you're taking. If you're taking excessive amounts of testosterone in what you might call like to get yourself to superhuman levels, that has a shelf life, that has a lot of risk factors associated with it. It's not something that's really maintainable. But if you're doing this to optimize yourself to get to the top end of normal, to feel good, there are no documented risk factors that has any additional risk at all in terms of cardiovascular risk or things like that. So like for finding a doctor, you got to do research. I've worked with a dozen different doctors on this. I know clinics all around the country. People, I tell people when I'll put up a post about testosterone replacement therapy, I've been like shadow banned by Instagram a dozen times. And I always get people being like, why don't you tell us what you're taking? And I'm like, I can't give you dosages because every time I say anything specific, my Instagram gets shut down. And that's how I operate a lot of my business is through my Instagram. So in general. And I'm happy to talk about like specifically like what I do on podcasts and things. But I always tell people in these posts to like, if you're interested in finding a good doctor, just DM me and I'll hook you up wherever you are. I go on your Instagram. I look at, where do you live? There's certain clinics that pair up better with some people versus others. If you're a young kid who's trying to optimize, performance, that might lead towards one type of clinic. Or if you're somebody who's trying to deal with like health issues or autoimmune things or fertility, you want to do testosterone, but you're still trying to have a baby, that might be another clinic. So I'll filter people towards some of these practitioners, and also like disposable income, right? How much money you have to allocate towards this stuff. There's always an option, but we have the technology to fix you, right? We have the ability to do it safely. That can show a vast improvement in your longevity and quality of life. So why wouldn't you want to fix yourself? I don't know why,
I think the narrative is changing a little bit. I think with folks I think the more open people are about it, I think the narrative does change, right? Whereas it was very mysterious before and you can only assume or thing like that. So I think it is changing.
People are scared and ashamed to talk about it or to pursue it. I've never named names, but like there have been a dozen CrossFit HQ staff members that have contacted me that I've put onto clinics, this doctor or that doctor, and who are so afraid that anybody would find out that they're doing testosterone. I'm like, that's so silly. who is lording over you in that way to make you ashamed about wanting to be the best version of yourself? And if that's the case, is that the type of environment you want to be in? You know, like,
right. Yeah. And for like, I started getting my blood work done, maybe like 2020, just doing like sort of a naturopathic sort of blood panel of all sorts of things. How often do you, and we actually did a podcast. We actually had someone come on and talk about blood panels and what you're looking for, what you should do. And just from optimizing, just to see what's going on inside, right? Like it's hard to, we just guess and we just assume but it's nice seeing what's going on and understanding more about that. How often are you sort of doing sort of blood panels or getting your blood work done?
So if you think about that, like sickness, wellness, fitness continuum, right? I bet you most of the people listening to this podcast in terms of physical capacity are probably outliers. They're probably stronger and quicker and leaner than most people. And they're optimal, okay? Every other blood marker should also be optimal. It shouldn't be selective. It shouldn't be like, I'm optimal, but my blood pressure is high. Like, you want to address those weaknesses. Everything should be optimal. Testosterone, estradiol, growth hormone, thyroid function, CBCs, cardiometabolic panels, everything should be in the sweet spot. If it's not, because like traditionally, like medicine we call it, is it healthcare? It's sick care, right? Let's treat. Mm-hmm. If you're out of range, here's some medicine to fix a symptom. I think now the shift towards functional medicine says like, no, let's treat the root causes as these issues are subclinical, meaning they start to get to the lower end of normal or the high end of normal or whatever it is. Let's try to get it back into the optimal range before it becomes a problem. If you know you're genetically predisposed to X, we can get ahead of it ahead of time. Your health is your wealth. Invest in it early. So like Camille and I, 2015, right after she won the games, I was like, there's this doctor out in Arizona, and he's this naturopathic guy, and he's apparently doing some amazing things with athletes, and let's go out there. So originally I wanted her to go out there, but I went with her, and they're like, hey, Dave, let's do you. And so we both did it. We got a gazillion blood panels of this, and that was very, very expensive. And then they started giving us an insane amount of supplements and pills. I think that year we spent over $50,000 on supplements and blood work and pills. And my testosterone went from 300 to 350, which on a spectrum of 250 to 1,000 is kind of the norm. It's like very marginal. I'm like really disappointed that I spent all this money. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? Why don't you just give me that $45 vial of testosterone instead? Because I think that this is just a waste. But it was good in terms of just like education of health markers and stuff like that. And there are things sometimes you can do naturally. There are things you can do from a lifestyle nutritional perspective or a training perspective. And then there's some things that require pharmaceuticals. So I like finding doctors that don't just use one, but use all those tools to be able to get you where you need to be. When I started this, I was like determined, be like, I want to be able to raise my testosterone naturally, which is like the tooth fairy. Okay, doesn't fucking exist. Like there's some things you can do for marginal improvement, or if you're really fucked up and you're not sleeping and you're just a mess, you can see some decent improvement. But if you're like a guy like me or you, who's like you eat well, you train well, you try to sleep, you're doing the biohacks, like, and you think that adding this one herb or supplement is going to be like game changer for you, it's not the case. That's not it. That's not how it works. The only thing to create that kind of remarkable change is to supplement. And there are things that can help, like peptides can help. There's a peptide called HCG, which helps with testicular function. And I actually take it on the regular for fertility, but also to reduce the chance of testicular atrophy. Because as you have, you supplement with testosterone, your body knows that it doesn't need to produce as much, so it can slowly start to atrophy your testicles. Well, something like HCG can help counteract that stuff. If you're someone out there who's young, who's like, I think I might want to have kids down the line, that's one way to avoid, fertility issues that could potentially arise from supplementing with testosterone. Although I know dozens of bodybuilders that have gotten their wives pregnant and have never done any of that while they're guzzling excessive amounts of this stuff. So, there's an application for all this. But I think, if you know what your squat snatch is, if you know what your deadlift is and your Fran time, and you know how many calories you're getting every day and what the macronutrient splits are, why shouldn't you also know your blood work? Why shouldn't you also know where your creatinine levels are, where your thyroid levels are, your testosterone levels? You should know all that, because if you're not looking, you're flying blind. And optimization starts with precision and accuracy. It starts with, Prescribe, assess, adjust. That's the process of optimization. I prescribe you something. Here's my best guess as to where you might start. I assess it after a period of time to figure out how did we do, and then I adjust it accordingly. And that process repeats again and again and again with your blood work.
Yeah, right. No, 100%. And it was a huge eye opener when I started doing a blood panel, and just to know more and more. Right, you want to optimize everything. So I love that, and I think it's one of those things. Like, it seems so like why didn't I do this earlier? Like, it was one of those things where it's just like maybe it was just like I didn't think about it. But like, if you train, if you care about your nutrition intake, but like, it's like, even like when I'm thinking about like just getting an MRI or a scan, and it's like, I got a nagging injury or whatever, and it's like, you're not going to know. Like, you can go to a PT Sports, and I went to a athletic doctor, and he told me, he's like, well, we're not going to really know unless we see what's going on inside. And it's like, you're right. I mean, it's the same thing with blood panel. Like, we just guess on the outside, right? And so like, getting access to those things and doing those things is something that I've really changed my mindset on. Like, just like Wadapalooza, I went to Wadapalooza and I got an MRI because I've just been in Canada. We wait almost a year for MRIs, but
that's crazy. For Canadian healthcare. You know, there's a spectrum for this too, Chad, because I think like for everybody, no matter what we're talking about, I think the first instinct is to kind of think like, oh, okay, well, what's the easiest thing I can do? Like, my shoulders hurt. Let me try rehabbing it first. See if that works. Right? Maybe that works. Fine, no problem. Like, you know,
inexpensive.
Your testosterone is low. Well, let me try cleaning up my diet first. Let me try get better. See what that does. And then you're like, okay, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. What's the next thing? Or maybe we try this type of thing or that type of thing, and it kind of scales up. But you don't need to start with the surgery, and you don't need to start with the testosterone either. You know, like, you can just start looking first, right, and trying things. And you know, for all these things, like I always tell guys who are getting on that train, the T train. Woo, once you start, you're not going to want to stop. You're not going to want to stop. It's going to be the kind of thing where it's like, you've never felt better, you never looked better. You know, like, you're not going to want to get off it. So enter into that relationship with a level of care and caution so that you can do it for as long as you need to. And you don't have to stop because you were excessive or irresponsible with it. You know, because like, that's just silly. And I think for a lot of folks, this can become a slippery slope, just like CrossFit, where things start getting excessive, or like more is better, more is not better, better is better. And I think in terms of long-term protocols for training, nutrition, pharmaceuticals, you know, supplements, think about what's the least amount with the most effect, because that'll be the most sustainable. You know, like maybe it doesn't need to be 400 milligrams of testosterone. Maybe it can be 150 and you're fine there. You know, like, or in terms of training, like maybe it doesn't need to train 6 days a week. Maybe you can train 4 days a week hard and get just as much benefit without, you know, the additional volume and stress. So the least amount with the most effect seems to be the sweet spot for most long-term things.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question and we'll wrap up. Didn't get a chance to talk specifics about nutrition, but let's save that for another time. Love to have you back on. But I wanted to ask you, you have a young family, you have a coaching business, a program, a thriving community, you have a large online presence, and training is a significant priority for you. How do you fit it in, right? For the moms, the dads, the career drivers listening to the community or listening to this podcast, you know, we're all trying to fit it in, right? We're all trying to have this balanced lifestyle, but we're all trying to go after 3 or 4 different things and do everything great. How do you fit it all in? How do you stay sort of balanced, and how do you sort of, you know, how are you successful in that way? How do you balance it all?
So like, I think a lot of folks tend to like be resistant to change, you know, like I think that like as your circumstances and life logistics kind of evolve, you know, the way you approach this stuff has to evolve too. Like, I can't train the way that I did when I was in my 20s. Like, every day isn't about me, right? Like most, in fact, like the vast majority
rarely
of the time, I mean,
Maybe your birthday.
It's either work or family, and that's it. If I have any time for myself, it's kind of a rarity. So the idea of like, hey, I'm going to get up at 9, I'm going to stroll to the gym and get myself some nice breakfast and go train, hang out, maybe come back home, do some therapy, go back in the afternoon, train again. Like
that's not happening
on the weekend. Like I lived that way for years, right? That would not work for my current lifestyle now, right? I'm lucky if I could get, in the day, I'm lucky if I could carve out 90 minutes to get some training in during the day. So don't compare yourself to what you used to do or what other people are doing, what games athletes are doing, and think like, well, I need to do that if I want to be at that level or look like that. Just meet yourself where you're at, focus on what you can do again, and see if like without putting the expectation or assigning a good or a bad to it, just look at like, okay, well, what is feasible, right? For me, it's, when I'm up early, like it starts with 30 minutes on the bike, right? That's easy. My daughter's still asleep. If she is awake, I plop her in front of the couch to watch cartoons as I'm biking. The fasted cardio's done. Boom, right? The same thing with nutrition. Like, obviously I'm not going to go out to eat every meal. I got to prep a lot of my own stuff. A lot of my meals are sometimes oatmeal and protein powder because like time, logistics, that kind of stuff. So you got to figure out a way to make it work. And then prioritization and communicating with your spouse, like of all the things, like I don't care about cars. I don't care about going out to bars or drinking. Like I don't need that kind of, here's what I need. I need to be able to train hard once a day and I need about 90 minutes to do it. And so we figure out where that fits. She's the same exact way. We understand that. So I'm willing to take a hit to allow her to train. She's willing to, do whatever to give me that time. But, just like in the airplane, when the airplane's going down and the mask drop, you got to put yours on before you can help other people. Like you got to be good for yourself before you can be good for everyone else. So I think a lot of people will say things like, well, I care too much about my family and I need to be there for them. But in the meantime, when you are there for them, you're like a miserable son of a bitch because you're not right with yourself. So you're actually not good for them. The way to be good for them is by carving out that time, whether it be self-care, time in the gym or whatever, so that you can be the best version of yourself for the people around you. But if you're not taking care of yourself, that's not going to happen. You're going to become a resentful, curmudgeon, grumpy old man. So don't do that.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This has been insightful. I think the folks listening to this are going to get a great deal of information and knowledge. If anyone's interested, where's the best place to find out more about you, your programming, the art of hypertrophy? What's the best place to kind of get a hold of you?
Well, I'd probably categorize it. So like if you guys have like anything like medical, internal chemistry related, send me a DM at Dave freaking Lipson and I can give you a decent referral to clinics that are both in and out of country. You guys ever want to do like a consultation call and talk about anything, training, nutrition, mindset, pharma, whatever, there are features on thundrbro.com where you can book a call with me for a consult if you want to get more information on that. But thundrbro.com is the main site where we offer all of our services. So it's THUNDRBRO. So it's like Thun Dr. Bro science meets real science. And that's where you got like all of our books, like our training library with the daily lifestyle. I didn't show you this, Chad. This daily lifestyle journal. This is all the stuff so training, nutrition with all the hydration, recovery, digestive protocols. So like all of our books are on there. All of our challenges. We got some kick-ass challenges with our 30-day shred challenge where we combine training, nutrition, and one-on-one coaching for like big, very, very remarkable body transformations in terms of reducing body fat and bringing out muscularity in just 30 days. That's a really popular challenge. Our 90-day Get Huge book, which we just launched, is also a challenge option as well, where you can combine that with nutrition coaching and you get a journal and a beefcake t-shirt with it where you can kind of like do it with the community. And I think, like I said, like the training is great, but what you're doing outside the training has a lot more impact. So I think while there is a whole lifestyle protocol in that book, being able to coach through it and get, specifics and stuff can be really helpful. And then there's just like all things Thunder, man. We try to find all these different avenues to help people, thrive, not just survive, or be able to blend performance and aesthetics together in a number of ways, from our training gear to our books to our, programs and services. And then we even have some like top tier stuff where, I have like a very short list of private clients where I'll like write all their stuff for them. But go to thundrbro.com and you can check us out at Thundrbro, and I'm at Dave freaking Lipson. If you have any questions, unlike most people, I answer every single DM. Even if it's like somebody who's like, I hate you, I think you're stupid. And I'm like, okay.
Yes.
Thanks, bro.
Yes, I can attest to that. You're very accessible. And yes, I would definitely encourage everyone to follow. You always have some good information about nutrition, some cool finisher type workouts that anybody, if they're even interested in doing some of this, even I feel like I bought the finisher Bible. I think that's a great introduction for anybody that's kind of interested in sort of your programming to kind of dabble it in. Whether you're an endurance folk, CrossFit folk.
Either that Get Huge program that's just like 3 days a week, or that finisher's book is just a great way to get exposed to hypertrophy methodology without having to go full tilt into it. Where you can just like still do your CrossFit workout and you just like carve out 10 minutes, pick a body part, find a cool finisher and try it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, it's been amazing. Thank you so much again. This has been great. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for listening over the years. This has been awesome. And I'm super excited to get this back up and running. So
number 64 right here.
Number 64.
Awesome.
All right,
thanks,
Chad, everyone.
I'll talk to you in a few minutes too.
You betcha.
All right, brother. Thanks for having me on. It's been an honor. And please, if you're out there and you're listening, let me know how I can help you. Because I'm so grateful for the journey I've had. A lot of people have been that person to me. People like Stan Efferding or Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, who just like, let me know I was in your shoes. We all kind of pass it or pay it forward. So, if you're out there and you want to win, I want to show you how to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Dave, stay on it. I'm just going to stop this recording.